So we just had one bad day from Alberta, but again, the cases only went up by like 10 yesterday, or sorry, 2 days ago. Yesterday we only had 39 new cases. Active cases are steady. Hospitalizations up a little bit. Beginning still 43 hospitalizations. That's nothing to be worried about. The vast majority of those people will live. I mean, 8 in the ICU. Those are the people you really have to worry about. Again, no new deaths over the last, I think it's been 4 days or so since we last had a death. So again, death rate continues to go down. Total tests 435,000. Again, they continue to test a lot of people. Again, it's same old when it comes to Alberta. I think what's going to happen, I think it's pretty clear that because we continue to slowly increase testing, um, and the government is perfectly fine with thousands of people gathering in small areas as long as it fits their political ideology, we will see the active cases stay pretty steady. That's something I think that's going to happen. Again, for the simple reason too that I think the government wants the problem to get worse again, or at the very least, just flat out doesn't care because the way they're handled it so far. Again, there's two ways to ascribe the government's motives, and I include the Kenny government and the Ford government in there, so don't try and play the bias card. Um, I mean, I think Kenny especially has done a better job of handling it than Ford and the rest of Canada, but still, he's not nearly as good as what he should have been. Um, they want it to get worse, or at the very least, they're just grossly incompetent. Like they're so incompetent that someone like me would have made better decisions than them. I'm no one special. I'm no one special. Um, so that's the point too. Is that again, we should have been open long ago. We should have been open. We should have been fully reopened before all this garbage happened, and that would have been a good test case to see. Okay, well, just how much will the cases increase? Because the problem is right now. Um, Places are increasingly reopening, and you look and see a lot of these new cases too, is they're largely young people. I'll get to that soon, but the main take home point here, at least, I mean, the take home point is there's nothing we need to worry about. The active cases are very steady. The active cases aren't going to go way down anytime soon. It's just not going to happen because the amount of tests being completed continues to go up, and there will be a second wave at some point. We may already be in it. I don't know, but there will be a second wave. Will it be bad though? Absolutely not. Will it be worse than the first one? It all depends on how the government handles it. But well, and again, by how the government handles it too, is that closing things down won't fix the thing. I think that's been pretty much definitively proven. Even though there's still tons of people out there that think that the lockdowns are the only thing that prevented us from the hospitals being overwhelmed, even though there's no evidence of that. Um, I mean, you look at the state, or the states that were hit the worst, like New York, are the hardest hit place in the world, pretty much. The reason that they were hit so bad is that the governor and the people in the government ordered sick people into nursing homes, which made the virus be ravaged through nursing homes. So again, it has nothing to do with the lockdowns. They even said two-thirds of people testing positive in New York were people that were self-isolating. If the lockdowns worked so good, then that number should be incredibly low. I mean, 10, maybe 20% at the most. But it's the majority. So, like I say, if anything, the lockdowns had a negative impact on the spread, and let alone when you include the impact to people's mental health and to society as a whole, they were infinite amount of times worse than, or infinite amount of times more negative than positive that came out of the lockdowns. Again, so the numbers out of the states, they've been very high over the last week, very high. But you look at the deaths, they had 40,000 cases yesterday, but just 285 people died. So again, the death rate continues to go down. Again, you look at the deaths starting about the end of March. I mean, the end of March they had 822. Going into April, they've been over 1,000, and every day in April, they had over 1,000 people die. Um, and you look at the active cases, they've said all time they've had above like 35, 40,000 for almost a week straight. But yet you look at the deaths, and they're actually going down over that amount of time. I mean, So again, there's nothing at all that they need to be worried about. I see it constantly, people growing, oh, we need to re-lock down and we need to ease lockdown restrictions. Well, no, that hasn't worked. It clearly hasn't worked. And the only reason things are getting bad is because you allowed or continue to allow tens of thousands of people to congregate in hundreds of cities across North America. That is why the cases are going way up. If it wasn't because of that, then we would see the deaths going up. And again, the numbers that prove that is that, so these are the numbers out of Minnesota. And the number here is, again, this goes back to May 1st, so it's a very good chart, and they have it broken down by age group. And you see the amount of people 70 plus that are testing positive, or sorry, this is the percentage of positive of the new cases. And you look at the number of people, the lowest age group is 70 plus, the next lowest age group is 60 to 69, the next lowest age group after that is 40 to 49, 50 to 59, 0 to 19. The two with the most is 30 to 39, and by far the most is 20 to 29. And you look at those numbers started to skyrocket in about June 15th. So again, it's exactly what I've been saying all along, and I think this is, I mean, we already pretty much had definitive proof, but again, this is even more that the age bracket that are overwhelmingly being tested positive are young people with nothing to worry about. People in this age bracket are less likely to die from the flu. We have nothing to worry about. The number of active cases as a percentage that are testing positive of people in the age bracket that actually we need to be worried about, that being 60 to 69 and 70 plus, are less than 10% of the total new case. Actually, they're probably about 10% because they're combined. Um, so basically, 10% of the new cases are people that we actually need to be worried about. So again, there's nothing that we need to be worried about here. I really don't understand the paranoia. But I mean, when I look back at this, I kind of do understand the paranoia because people just refuse to change their minds. And look at this too. These are the numbers from last Friday. 7,000 people, 7,045 people infected, but just two deaths. Again, so about 1 in 3,500 people, for every 3,500 people roughly that tested positive, one died. That is a death rate below 0.1%, well below 0.1%. The death rate for the flu, at least as far as I've heard, is around 0.1%. So again, the death rate in Minnesota, the places that had the rioting and the protesting on the largest scale, again, it is just one day, but much less than 1 in 1,000. So again, there's nothing to be worried about. I really don't understand the paranoia. Um, but anyway, and again, getting back to some more Canadian news, this is from True North, and they have a title: 76% of Canadians want a total pause in immigration. And I mean, you can go check out the article. I'm not going to read all of it, but the poll basically said 76% of Canadians polled by a research company based out of Toronto strongly agree or moderately agree with the statement Canada should temporarily pause immigration until a vaccine is developed for the virus and the unemployment rate drops down to pre-virus levels, which I would say should be even lower because our unemployment rate was actually pretty high even going into this. But I mean, at the very least, that would be at least better than nothing. And I mean, they break it down even by political ideology here, and that 2/3 of Canadians who voted Liberal in the last federal election, uh, and again, 67% of Liberals, 66% of NDP voters. Um, Conservatives, it was obviously would have to be higher to make up that difference. Um, Only 48% of the Bloc too. So I think that's just the Bloc kind of privilege, and that they kind of get to do whatever they want because they're Quebec and they can force their garbage down our throats. Not that again, when it comes to the whole Bloc thing, I'm perfectly fine with them if they want to have their French laws. I mean, I support them leaving Canada too. Like everybody, I mean, not everybody, but I mean the Wexit should happen. Quebec should form their own country if the Maritimes want, any of the Maritime provinces want to go with them. Go ahead. Um, Again, but the problem is that because they can force their everything needs to be in French garbage down our throats when no one in Western Canada speaks French. I mean, the only reason they even know it is because they're forced to learn it in school, and Quebec forces us to have stuff in French. Like that's the only reason people actually care. Um, but anyway, um, again, even the clear majority of Liberal voters and NDP voters support that too. So it's something that absolutely should be done. But I mean, of course, the Liberals aren't going to do it because they're in shambles right now. I mean, the only thing propping them up is the fact that the Conservatives are kind of in shambles right now too, without a leader. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the problem when it comes to the Canadian political spectrum, and the fact too is that the Liberals are going to keep immigration incredibly high because they need the votes. This is from Kian Bext. Now, I'll basically read his tweet and talk a little bit about it here. He says, I have obtained documents which confirm Justin Trudeau is among be using Amazon.com to administer citizenship tests that will allow candidates to take the oath while overseas, virtual immigration factories, aka Operation Restore Majority. Now, again, how in the world can you possibly support stuff like this? Like, how can you know someone's being honest with you and all this kind of stuff if you want to do it over Zoom or over Skype or wherever they plan on doing it over? Yeah, he says Zoom here. Again, and this is the thing too, is that they can't possibly justify bringing in massive amounts of people from foreign countries and still justify their, oh, we need to support the lockdown garbage. So this is how they're going to do it. They're going to do it over Zoom apparently, and it's kind of ingenious in a way, but it's pretty scary to think of. So anyway, this is from Paul Joseph Watson, and he responds to a title out of the Daily Mail, I believe, saying Black Lives Matter destroys statue of immigrant who died fighting slavery. And Paul Joseph Watson says this illustrates how statues are being pulled down not because of slavery, but because they represent whiteness. Now, again, we have many of the top Black Lives Matter founders and individuals saying, yeah, we're Marxists, we're communists. They're clearly, I mean, even if they didn't have that, it's still rather obvious. And again, this is how you can tell that a group is far left, is that one of their main objectives will be to attack white people and white culture, because what is white people overwhelmingly do not vote for the left, again, of all the races, especially white men, which is again why they always attack white men so much, because they are the least likely demographic to vote for the left. And how do commies and the left get, I mean, even just the left in general get elected? Well, they need to have the most people on the left as possible voting for them, and they need to discourage the most amount of people that don't vote for them to not vote, and to, I mean, in a lot of ways, just flat out kill them, because that's where we're going to end up here. Again, so this is the problem too, is that the whole statue thing. I mean, I may have to make a whole video on it, but it doesn't make any sense, because if it's about getting rid of statues of people that caused a lot of pain and suffering, then you should support tearing down Marx statues. You should support tearing down Lenin statues. You should support tearing down all those kind of statues. But because people don't, yeah, you kind of lost all credibility. So anyway, the last thing I wanted to talk about is again something I brought up, but I literally have the video of it pulled up here. I'm not going to play it because it can get you in trouble and whatnot. But again, you can go check it up. It's from Candice Malcolm on June 24th. It's got 53,000 views, so it went pretty viral, at least for Canadian standards. And Andrew Lawton says, rather embarrassing, Commissioner Lucky says there is absolutely systematic racism within the RCMP, but can't identify one example of it. Again, this is the problem with people, is that, I mean, I kind of feel for this person, but in a way I don't, because I wish she would just, I wish that we could just stand on principle, in that if systematic racism is this big issue, we should be able to rattle off um, example after example, even if you're not up and up when it comes to that kind of stuff. You should be able to rattle off example after example. Because people can't, I think it's pretty telling that there's no such thing as systematic racism or systemic racism. And again, they can't point towards one example of it. And the examples they do point towards of it are ones that are a generation, 2 generations, or slavery, which is 10 generations ago. or stuff that just flat out isn't true. The whole blacks are more likely to be in prison because they're black, which I believe is true to us. It's true, but it's not true nearly to the extent that they make it out to be. And again, the other thing when it comes to that too is that the most of the black-white sentencing gap can be made up for when you account for prior criminal record. Again, they're always up in arms because, oh, the black-white sentencing gap, and oh, this black guy got thrown in jail because of marijuana legalization. But what they don't tell you is that the black guy is a lot more likely to have a prior criminal record, which means he's more likely to end up in jail or end up in jail for a longer time. And the other thing too to point out is that the male-female sentencing gap is far bigger than the black-white gap. And again, until they acknowledge that and protest for that, I don't care about your much smaller issue when there's one that's clearly bigger. And it's not to say I don't care. It's just you're kind of hypocritical to ignore a much bigger gap that is clearly affecting society in a negative way and pick out the tiny one. Like it's like walking over the 100 piles of bodies and being worried about the 10 bodies, right? It just doesn't make sense. So, um, anyway, I'm going to leave the video there. If you'd like to make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email. I got linked in the description. I appreciate any donations. But at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And last few things, check me out on Twitter. Check me out on Parler. Check me out on BitChute. Again, you got to support people that are out there speaking the truth. So please check out all those links.